The college football season is right around the corner, and of course that means conference media days are in full swing across the nation. The Mountain West held its football media day at the Circa Resort and Casino here in Las Vegas, the fabulous downtown Las Vegas. And I gotta say, Circa did a great job hosting this event. The setup, the staging, the visuals, everything that they did to make this feel special for the Mountain West Conference was on par. I know Circa's known for Stadium Swim, which is one of the hottest places to watch a sporting event by the pool, get a drink, have a good time at Stadium Swim. But Circa did a great job hosting the Mountain West Conference Football Media Day this past week. So shout out to Circa. Shout out to Las Vegas. They really always do these events well. So shout out Circa Resort and Casino. So at Conference Media Day, there was a lot of news that broke. There was a lot of things we got to see, a lot of people we got to meet, including a lot of brand new head coaches to the conference. But I think the story, as with every Conference Media Day, was the preseason rankings and recognitions that were announced at this media day. And the big splash for me, of course, was that UNLV football ranked second in the preseason rankings for the Mountain West Conference for this upcoming football season. So naturally, that is what this first episode of the Breakdown Podcast will be about. I'm your host, Caleb Herring, former UNLV quarterback and current commentator on the UNLV football broadcast. So yeah, naturally, I'm talking about UNLV football in episode 1. Go figure.
Watch the breakdown.
So yeah, UNLV was ranked second in the preseason rankings, and that's a big deal historically for UNLV. The Mountain West Conference has not been good to UNLV football, and they've had a really rough history as far as their recognition, the way they finish, and the success that they've had in the conference. But obviously last year, coming off of a 9-win season and hosting the Mountain West Championship game was a big deal. And a lot of people took note across the conference, and rightfully so. They respected those accomplishments, and I think that had a big part to leading to what the rankings were this year. UNLV returns a lot of their cast from last season, so it's only right that they would be number 2 in the preseason rankings when you look at it through that lens. Obviously, Boise State at number 1. This is their 14th consecutive season being preseason ranked number 1 for Mountain West football. Good for them. But UNLV football making a splash at number 2 is a big story for the Mountain West, and they've been sort of the darling of the offseason. Coach Odom, coming off of his Coach of the Year honors in the Mountain West, also has been a bit of a darling in some sense, where the media has kind of gravitated to him, not just for the success on the field, but for his kind of savvy off of it as well. He does a really good job of the media and engaging the community. So naturally, people have been talking about Barry Odom and what he did, not just for the conference, but on a national basis. He was a finalist for first-year head coach of the year. So a great job by Barry Odom and what he's done to keep the buzz going throughout the offseason. But it's come to a head now. The Conference Media Day was a big coming out party for UNLV football, trying to turn the page, duplicate, and maybe even add on to the efforts of last season. So what does a number 2 preseason ranking really mean? Grand scheme of things, it doesn't mean anything, right? It's nice to say what you think about a team preseason, but football is a game based on results. So what you say at the beginning of the day means nothing if you don't finish the thing the right way. So UNLV has a number 2 rating. They just have expectations now. And maybe the expectations are more for the outside viewers of the program, because it's very clear from talking to the players and talking to the coaches and being around this team that the expectations of winning football have been there since Coach Odom was handed the keys to this program. The players in the locker room have already bought into the expectations of winning, and there was no more evidence of that than the plane ride home after the bowl game. I think there was a solemn feeling on that plane of not just we're happy to be here, we were lucky for this experience, we're glad we got our bowl gifts or whatever. That wasn't the sentiment that I got from the players, and most of them, if not all of them, were very distraught about losing, about the way they finished the season on a 3-game losing streak. San Jose State, Boise State in the championship game, and of course Kansas in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. They were really pissed off about that. They expected to win each of those games and really had a chance to win them and just didn't come out on top. So the winning expectation for UNLV has already been there. Maybe it's new for outsiders looking in, but it's a good thing to say that UNLV has expected to win, and they're expecting to follow up on that season last year with an even better one this year. So how do they follow up on last season? I think it started with recruiting. I think recruiting was a big deal for UNLV in the offseason. They recruited the transfer portal well and got pieces in place to make an immediate impact on the team this season. They added depth in some key positions, including in the secondary, where I think there's going to be a great competition going through the fall. And maybe even lasting throughout the season. I think Coach Odom's not opposed to having competition at certain groups throughout the course of the season. And whoever's a starter on day one, we saw last year, may not be the starter in week 9 or 10. So look for that for UNLV, the competition throughout the year on the additions to the roster, the transfer names that you've heard in. Make sure you listen out for those guys and how they impact the rotation going forward throughout the season. There'll be a separate video on the transfer portal and recruiting. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. Give your feedback so that we know exactly what you want to hear on the next episode. But I think tracking the transfer portal is a big deal for every program, so we'll definitely dedicate a whole video to that. With that, though, I will say that one of the best things about transfer portal recruiting is not necessarily just recruiting guys because they're good or because they went to a big school, but recruiting guys because they fit with what you do. And I think there's a good example of that with Jackson Woodard, who's currently the best defensive player on UNLV's roster and by a lot of people's estimation, the best defensive player in the conference. Jackson Woodard transferred from Arkansas. Yes, that was a big deal. But Jackson Woodard was a walk-on at Arkansas. So why did he translate so well to UNLV? Well, I think a lot of that has to do with fit and familiarity with the system. Coach Odom coached Jackson Woodard, and he understood that Jackson Woodard was a fit for his system and knew exactly where to put him as a linebacker for UNLV. So that fit with the team is a big a part of recruiting as the star behind the guy's name. So 3-4-star recruit is great, but does he fit with your system? Does he fit with your culture? Is he all about the work like the rest of the guys on the UNLV roster are at this point? That was important for UNLV, and I think they've got the transfers that fit well both on a schematics level and with the culture of the team right now. The big question is, can they repeat their efforts? And in short, yes, there'll be another video again in the future about why I think they can actually live up to their expectations and maybe exceed them. But I think they can, in short, as a team, live up to the expectations of that number 2 ranking in the preseason. Now, along with the power rankings being number 2, UNLV also had a host of individual accolades announced at the media day for the Mountain West Conference. 5 UNLV players made the preseason all-conference team, and that's a big deal, again, for UNLV, kind of historic here as far as the relevance and the respect given across the conference in past years. Those 5 players are wide receivers Ricky White, Jacob DeJesus as a return man, Jackson Woodard, who also got the Co-Defensive Player of the Year award in the preseason, Cam Oliver, who was an interception machine last year, and Tiger Shanks, who anchored one of the best offensive lines in the conference and really in the nation when you look at the production of the run game for UNLV. So those 5 guys got preseason all-conference honors, and all of them are looking to return and duplicate those efforts, if not double down on them. And so, of course, when you look at Ricky White, 1,400 yards as a UNLV receiver, put him in the record books for the program. Great season for him, and he had a decision to make during the offseason. And that was one of the storylines for UNLV football and its fan base was who would leave in the transfer portal. I know a lot of fans were devastated, rightfully so, when Jaden Mayava entered the transfer portal and ended up at USC. That's a big piece of last year's success. And people were worried if Ricky White, with what he was able to accomplish last year, was such a hot topic in the offseason conversation that he decided to try his luck elsewhere. But through conversation with his family, with Coach Odom, he decided that what he had left to do here was a part of his goal list. And what his goal is to be drafted on day 1 in the NFL draft next year. He feels he can accomplish that this season. And I think last year he was a draftable wide receiver. And people talked about the transfer portal for Ricky. I was maybe concerned that he would be advised to go try his luck in the NFL, but he decided to come back and run it back with UNLV, which was a big get. You know, we talk about recruiting and getting transfer portal people in. Sometimes recruiting starts in-house. You have to re-recruit the players you already have, and I think Coach Odom did a great job with care and compassion to his individual desires as a player. Coach Odom was able to keep Ricky White in the fold, and I think that was big. It was big not just for Ricky White, for Jackson Woodard as well, Jacob DeJesus, all these guys potentially could have tried their luck in the transfer portal, but they all decided to come back, and they were re-recruited effectively by this coaching staff. And I think that's one of the biggest stories for this upcoming season. Not just the production on the field and yards and touchdowns and tackles, but there's an intangible leadership quality that those 3 guys, I would call them the core leaders of UNLV, Ricky White, Jacob DeJesus, and Jackson Woodard. There's an intangible leadership that they've brought to this program that I think is even more important than what they brought as far as production on the field. Production can get replaced. These 3 guys do something that is irreplaceable. They are leaders on and off the field. I've gone to practice. I've been around these guys, whether it's traveling on the road or on a day-to-day basis during fall camp. you see who the leaders are very early. And I think that becomes more apparent than the skill on the field. Ricky White was known for his catches and the yards that he got and the touchdowns and all those glitz and glamour stats. But what Ricky White was the best at in his receiving group was blocking downfield. And if you cut on the tape of Ricky White and watch the way he blocks in the run game, the way he blocks for his fellow receivers when they make the catch and he's the one blocking downfield, there's an intensity and a passion and an effort that goes into that inspires the rest of the team. UNLV has like a phrase that they coined this as, is what you do without the ball. Every time a play snaps, there's only one ball. There's 10 other guys out there who need to contribute in some way. Ricky White took pride in what he did without the ball in his hands, and that's why I think he separated himself as a leader. And not just doing it in games, but doing it in practice too. There's an immense amount of effort that Ricky gives to making sure he's good in the run game as a blocking wide receiver. Jacob DeJesus practices at 100 miles an hour. I warm-ups 100 miles an hour. Everything he does with the attention to detail, he does at full speed. And there's even times where I've seen James Shebest tell him to dial it back a little bit. We're just warming up. This is just kind of walk through tempo here. But the way he practices and the attention to detail, not only as a return man, but as a wide receiver in that group as well. The best players on the team stepping up and performing that way, especially from the position of wide receiver, which if you watch the receiver series on Netflix, they're known for being divas. That's kind of the mantra of the wide receivers in football. They're divas. The receivers on this football team are not divas. And receiver coach Del Alexander does a great job of coaching these guys up on not just the attention to detail, the steps on your route running, the technique that you have off the line of scrimmage, but also on the demeanor of a wide receiver and how you are supposed to conduct yourself on and off the field in order to not be a cancer to your team, so to speak. So there's a great system in place with those two guys in the wide receiver room as leaders for the intangible stuff as well. Jackson Woodard has been a leader since day one. And if you could like wrap up the term faith, football, and family and make it into a person, I think you would get Jackson Woodard. Like, this dude lives, breathes, and sleeps football nonstop. You can see it all over him, and it comes through with his effort and the way he practices. I'll say this again: UNLV has this portion of practice where it's like a simulated halftime, and the players go under the tent and get under the misters, and they sit there for 5 to 10 minutes. I don't really know how long it is. I think it varies from practice to practice, but they sit under the tents and they're required to get off their feet and relax. They hydrate, eat some pickles, orange slices, whatever the case may be. But it's every practice. At the end of that halftime, Jackson Woodard is the first player up on his feet with his helmet strapped on and out on the middle of the field, rooting the rest of his teammates in and getting them motivated to get the second half of practice started. There hasn't been a practice that I went to where that wasn't the case with Jackson Woodard. Drill to drill, Jackson's leading the way. He gets to the next drill first, roots the rest of the guys in. I don't think it's necessarily showmanship. I think it's intentional by him as a leader to do that and to have his teammates see that. They know he led the team in tackles. They know he's one of the best players on defense, if not the best player on defense. So when they see him doing that, it's that kind of internal pressure that he applies to say, hey, I'm tired too. I'm doing it. Why can't you? And that's big for the best player to do that. So you look at the three main units on the team: offense, defense, and special teams. Three of the best players in each of those units are doing the little things right so that the locker room is maintained. It was mentioned in conference media day by Ricky White that the team wants to be player-led. Like, they want these kinds of things to be player-led and not coaches having to pry it out of you, pry effort out of the players. Players are prying effort out. Players are coaching effort. Players are holding people accountable to a standard that is winning football. So that makes it easier for a great coaching staff to coach football, to coach X's and O's, to make halftime adjustments, to do those little things on the chalkboard or whiteboard or whatever they do it these days. I'm just dated myself there. Nobody uses chalk anymore. It's good for the team, the players, to police effort and accountability so that the coaches don't have to. They can focus on the X's and O's and the game plans and the strategies for the upcoming opponent. So I think it's a win for UNLV to keep that core group of players together and to have them as the voices of leadership in the locker room. That's going to be a big deal for the Rebels in this upcoming season. So speaking of this upcoming season, you take a peek ahead at the schedule for UNLV. And the question comes up, is this a tougher schedule? You don't see a Michigan, which was a juggernaut of a school for UNLV to go up to the Big House and play Michigan. But I think from top to bottom, this schedule is tougher, and it's totality than the Rebels played last year. Of course, they start the season off August 31st at Houston, which people who know college football know that Houston has been a team on the rise for the better part of the last decade. They've climbed from the Group of Five ranks into the Power Five ranks and are nationally recognized university at this point. So obviously, going there in the first game of the season is going to be a tough opponent. Outside of Houston, when you look at the rest of the Rebels non-conference schedule, the Rebels will host Syracuse. They'll play at Kansas, who they lost to in the bowl game, and also they'll play Oregon State. So the non-conference schedule is not full of slouches. I know Utah Tech might be the only quote-unquote easy game on the schedule, but the non-conference schedule is not going to be easy. And we know how difficult the Mountain West is as far as the competitive nature of these teams. Fresno State, the Boise State, San Diego State, Hawaii is always tough to play on the road. So UNLV has its work cut out for them this year. And in my opinion, this schedule is tougher. Is this team ready for that task? That becomes the question. I personally feel that this UNLV team is better than the team last year. Roster-wise, the development of the playbooks on both sides of the ball, I think UNLV has improved from what they did as a 9-win team last year. However, there is a chance that because of the difficulty of the schedule, the results might not be the same. You might not look at a 9-win team this year. There could be a 7-8 win season. I would not be surprised at all by that. And that's a non-biased opinion. Of course, I think UNLV has a chance to win every game they play, but a 7-8 win team might be what UNLV gets, even as a better team this year. And that might be a weird thing to accept and digest, but I think this schedule is a lot tougher from top to bottom than last year's. So are the expectations of having a conference championship, of winning the bowl game, unrealistic because of that? I don't think so. I think the team understands that winning football is the standard. They'll play their hardest. They'll play their best. They'll play hard, smart, tough football. That's their mantra now. That's their identity. So that's always going to be the standard. So falling short of that is going to be somewhat of a disappointment to them. And that's okay. That's a part of becoming a winning program, is having a hate for losing. Some athletes have phrased it this way when talking about winning and losing. Everybody likes to win. Everybody likes to celebrate wins. The difference between winners is the way that they hate losing. I think the culture in UNLV football has become intolerant of losing under head coach Barry Odom. I think the general consensus is, and it's cliche to say, but there's no such thing as moral victories is embodied right now with this locker room. They are devastated at the fact that they didn't win the Mountain West Championship. And as much as they don't show it publicly, they're pissed off about the way that the season ended. And they're eager to make amends for that. So they have a day-by-day approach, a week-by-week approach. Every opponent's going to be taken with the same level of seriousness, that appropriate fear, I guess is the way they call it. But they want to execute their game plan against everybody. And they want to play winning football no matter who the opponent is. And at the end of the season, they'll see where they end up. The expectation internally is to play winning football. And that's the standard that we as fans should hold them to. Are they playing winning football? Are they executing at a high level? Are they playing hard? Are they playing smart? And are they being tough out there on the field? I think if they do those things, they'll have another winning season and maybe even repeat as making a trip to a Mountain West Championship game. I think it's awesome that a bowl game for them is not the prize. I think when you look back at the way UNLV football has approached, and even the fan base has become kind of because of this bowl game being the standard of what winning was, is kind of a mediocre standard. And looking back at it, you could see the flaw in your ways. I think head coach Barry Odom, when you talk to him and you ask him about getting a bowl game and what that means, even when they got bowl eligible last year, at that point he was like, "What?" He was confused as to why that was such a milestone. Like, that's not the ultimate goal. Getting a bowl game is something that happens along the way to the championship game. So I think that's where his mindset has been. And you could see that kind of echoed through the locker room with the players. They really have embraced the idea that the championship and winning the championship in this conference is the goal. And there's a lot at stake this season for whoever comes out of the Mountain West. The championship, the playoffs expansion, the championship game could mean a lot more towards getting one of these Group of Five schools into that championship. Of course, the way the season goes has a lot to do with that. You pretty much have to have a spotless record going into that to even have that hope. But the conference is going to be eager to fight for that spot and to get recognition in that college football playoff at the end of the year. So a lot's at stake for whoever comes out on top of the Mountain West, and that's definitely on the goal list for UNLV. A big factor in whether or not UNLV will be successful is, of course, the quarterback spot. I will probably dedicate a future video to this specific competition later on, but Haj Malik Williams, Matt Sluka, and Cam Friel duke it out this fall for the number one QB job for UNLV football. Obviously, some big shoes to fill with the way Jade Mayava ended the season last year and what he was able to do. That's going to be an exciting competition that deserves its own full video. I'll get into breaking that one down in the future. So tell me what you're most excited about for UNLV football this season. In the comments below, let me know if there's a name maybe that you think should have gotten an all-conference nod on the UNLV football roster. Some guys were some heavy performers last season and maybe looking to have a breakout year. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more discussions and breakdowns on UNLV football and sports in general. We're willing to break it all down as the season unfolds. There's a lot to be excited about, so hopefully you stay tuned in. Till next time, peace.